There we go. You heard the pop. Okay. Good evening, everyone. With the posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Finance Committee for Tuesday, October 24th, 2023 to order. The first item on our agenda is the minutes of our last meeting from 10:10, copies of which are in the packets. Does anyone have any revisions that they need for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve. Motion by Watson. Is there a second? Second by Dinny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. The minutes are approved. Item 2 is discussion and possible action regarding the 2022 audit presentation from Clifton Larson. And so we have our Clifton Larson rep with us this evening, so we'll bring him up. And last week you each received these reports, so he's going to talk us through those. And we'll start with that. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Stuart Randall. I'm a manager with CLA. I'm responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of the audit. So I'm just going to take 10, 15 minutes to talk about the audit. I'm not going to spend too much time looking at the end of 22 results, since you probably are pretty close to getting your 24 budget underway. But I'll take a little time to talk about 22 and what we're looking forward to in the 23 audit and a bit beyond. Please interrupt me at any time if you have any questions. So I'm going to start with the main financial statement document, which is the 100 and some odd page document that you have in front of you. And I'm just going to start straight on page 1, which is our audit opinion. The audit opinion is essentially our opinion on the financial statements, on whether they accurately reflect the financial position of the city. And paragraphs 1 and 2 of that opinion say that these financial statements do, in fact, reflect the financial position of the city, which means it's an unmodified opinion, which is the best type of opinion. This is the type of opinion that the city wants to receive. It's a very good thing. It's a commendation to the city and the finance department, and we're pleased that we're able to provide that opinion again for this year. Moving on into the actual financial statements, just paging through, you have management's discussion and analysis, which is the city and the finance department's, explanation of various activities that occurred during the year, highlights of some financial numbers. But if we keep going on, I want to pause on page 19, which is the balance sheet for the governmental funds. Balance sheet for the governmental funds, this is pretty much a snapshot as of 12/31/22 of the financial position of the city. You have your assets, your liabilities, deferred inflows, and your fund balances. Fund balances essentially reflecting your reserves as of the end of last year. You can see your general fund has $14.5 million as of 12/31, of which $10.8 million is unassigned. That's essentially your reserves, how much you can have for spending in the future, emergencies, or anything else like that. One thing I do want to point out on this page, you'll see that there is a lease receivable in your TID 3 fund for $473,000. That's new activity this year. There was a new accounting standard that went into effect. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board likes to do these things every year or so. It seems more frequently nowadays. They decide we want to change the accounting rules a little bit, and this year they said we're going to change leases. And so we have a lease receivable scattered through a couple of pages of the financial statements, and there's also lease payables for either buildings, equipment, land that you're essentially borrowing or having borrowed from you. The TID 3 downtown development receivable for $473,000. That's a building that's being leased out to some entities within the TID. Looking ahead onto page 21, your statement of revenues and expenses, and forgot there was one more thing I wanted to point out on page 19, the balance sheet. In your other governmental funds, the other governmental funds is essentially the accumulation of all your non-major funds, the funds that the city has but aren't a significant operations. You'll see that there's an unearned revenue of about $11 million in the liability section. That reflects your unspent ARPA funds as of 12/31. It's actually about $11,010,000, give or take. There's some other things in that line item. Just want to remind the city that you have until the end of 2024 to obligate those funds and the end of 26 to spend those funds. Those are the federal guidelines as they stand. And somehow it's already the end of 23, so those dates are going to come fast. So I'm sure the city has plenty of plans on how to spend those funds. I just want to bring that out to say, those deadlines are coming up. Now turning to page 21, this is your statement of revenues and expenses, which shows your revenues and expenses for your major funds during the year. You'll notice that the general fund did decrease about $1.1 million, which from the high-end view of that, not exactly good, but if we look into the causes a little bit of why that happened, you'll see your miscellaneous revenue in your general fund is actually a negative $938,000. And what that reflects is about a $1.5 million unrealized loss on your investments. So the city has various investments in long-term government securities that were purchased and have been paying interest. You guys purchased them a couple years ago when interest rates are low, and I don't know if you've paid attention to the news at all, but interest rates are a bit higher right now. And so that essentially just reflects the decrease in fair market value that has occurred because these investments that the city is still receiving interest on is no longer quite as valuable on the open market, but the city is not holding these investments to trade, day to day, month to month. You're holding them for interest earnings. And so as time goes by, a lot of those investments will have matured this year, and you will have theoretically invested in new funds at a higher interest rate. So, you are earning more interest income with these new investments, and then hopefully interest rates will go down in a couple of years, and then the fair market value of those will go up, and the cycle will continue. This is what happens when interest rates fluctuate, and they've been fluctuating quite a bit over the last couple of years. Any questions on that? Okay, turning to page 23 and 24, this is the balance sheet, your statement of net position essentially for your proprietary funds, which are your utilities, your metro ride, the parking utility, essentially the operations of the city that you operate as similar to a business. You need to make you're trying to essentially recover your costs and not necessarily make a profit, but make sure that the capital assets and the debt, which are recorded in these statements, are properly financed and covered. Just want to point out that if you were to pull up last year's financial statements, specifically in your water and wastewater utility, you would see a large decrease this year in your non-depreciable assets and a large increase in your depreciable assets. This is reflecting that you guys turned your new water plant and your massive renovations of the wastewater treatment facility online this year, and so they're no longer work in process, but they are now depreciable assets. And where that comes into effect is, if you turn to the next page, which is page 25, statement of revenues and expenses, your income statement for your utilities, your depreciation expense next year is going to go up. And so it's going to be a matter of monitoring your operating income and your changes in net position to make sure those stay positive. The other factor in all of this is the financing for these capital improvements were safe drinking fund loans and clean water fund loans, which have revenue covenants associated with it, saying that you have to have a certain percentage of the current year's principal and interest earned. So as some of those principal and interest payments start coming due in 23 to 24, it's going to be important to monitor that you are still meeting those covenants in terms of having the necessary net revenues for those principal and interest payments. Also, as the city continues to move forward, looking into the PFAS remediation projects that I think I saw you guys just got an additional award recently on that, so that's good news for you guys. Looking through the rest of the statements, the footnotes essentially include information on your cash, your debt, capital assets, and TIDs. Going through, you have your budget to actual statements, and that's pretty much the financial statements in a nutshell. Just want to touch base on one other document that we sent along with the financial statements, which is the management letter. This is our opportunity to make recommendations, observations of the operations of the city, and looking forward to next year. So the management letter starts with a couple paragraphs. I'm not going to read it to you. You can read them on your own. But the first item is CCIT lease documentation. Essentially, as we were analyzing the leases of the city, we noticed that the City County IT Center rents the third floor of this building. There was no actual formal lease documentation associated with that. And so it was our recommendation just, for clarification and to prevent conflict in the future, to just get that down, formalize it on paper. Nothing too earth-shattering in that regards. The next one I wanted to pause a little bit on, which is the accounting software implementation. City switched to accounting softwares. For 2022, we were still auditing the old system. For 2023, we're going to be looking at the new system. And what we have seen at other entities that have gone through software conversions is the year-end process, the subsequent year audit kind of aren't necessarily the cleanest, easiest processes to go through. So it's just our recommendation that take this opportunity, get the processes cleaned up, get documentation done, start early, and have fun with it. Yeah, but in all honesty, it's going to be a challenge for the finance, what we have seen in other places. Maybe Mary Ann and her team will buck the trend, which I'm sincerely hoping they are. But it's just going to be a time where it's focus on the cash reconciliation, the balance sheet reconciliations, those things. The accrual process at year end, it's going to be different than what the city is used to. So invest the time now to make sure it's all working properly. And then finally, on the last page of the management letter, like I said, accounting standards, they're coming pretty regularly nowadays. So this past year, 2022, we were looking at leases, which was physical assets, buildings, cars, land. What this new standard is looking at, GASB 96, is subscription-based IT agreements. So it's essentially any agreement in which the city is paying for a multi-year license and has committed to pay multiple years. If I can preview out a little bit further down the line, you have your GASB 101, which is 25, I think that's coming due. That's changing how the liabilities associated with vacation and sick leave are being accounted for. So taking leases, this subscription-based IT agreement, compensated absences, if you take a step back and combine what the government accounting standards are looking at, they're essentially wanting to have these financial statements standardized to reflect every single potential liability going forward for all entities. Because some of these items, there were standards before, but they weren't necessarily clear or applied consistently. And so it's going to be interesting to help the city apply these standards, and we're going to be here to help them do that. So with that, I didn't want to take up too much of your time because your agenda was pretty booked, but if you guys have any questions, that's what I'm here for.
Does anyone have questions at all about the report? Go ahead, Doug.
So on the standardized subscription agreements, I assume they're staggered, they're not all due at one time. Are you looking to take them as they come, or are we looking to take a broad approach and hit them all at one time?
So the subscription-based IT, so what the standards say is, we'll be honest, we haven't dived too much into what it looks like at a city. We were dealing with this last summer with our school districts. And some of these school districts, they identified 150, 200 different agreements. But the key is it's multi-year agreements. So some items, like I have a personal Microsoft 365 subscription for Office. If I don't pay that, it goes away. What this standard is looking at is multi-year. So only the situations where you are locked in for 2 or 3 years to say, I am paying this amount each year.
Okay. All right, any additional questions? If not, we'll place those reports on file. Thank you for that report.
Yep.
Okay. Switch back to the agenda. So our next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible action regarding the 2023 Business Improvement District Plan. That's an annual event for us that we approve their plan. I think that's a plan that they levy upon themselves, for how they will charge and pay for certain services. So does anyone have any questions on that? If not, is there a motion to approve the bid district plan? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Watson. Go ahead, Marianne.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's on council for this evening, too.
It is. Okay. Further discussion on that? If not, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action on approving an accepted offer for the following parcel in the Stewart Avenue, South 72nd Avenue, South 48th Avenue Street project, and that's regarding parcel 49 at 4805 Stewart Avenue and 4905 Stewart Avenue for new highway right-of-way. Copies of which are in the packets as well. Anyone have questions on that? That's a project we've been working at with this type of stuff for some time now. Is there a motion to approve the item? Motion from Lukens, second by Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. That item carries as well. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action on approving a budget modification for the City Hall security project. So we've got some documentation in the packets for that as well. It looks like bids for that plan, which is to secure the lobby here that we had approved a while back, are slightly higher than where we believed they would be at the time of the approval. I guess, Mary Ann, did you want to walk us through that at all? Or oh, Eric's got this item, sorry.
That's right.
But it looks like the modification that we need is 66,470. I think they're asking for 68.
Yeah, that's correct. So there were 2 add alternates that came in. One was for ballistic panels, which was be below the glass on the clerk's offices that, join. And those would be in the walls. And then also a queuing system for the finance, like during really busy times, they would have lights above the different windows, and then people would see which ones are open, which ones are not, to kind of keep people flowing through. One of the biggest items in the estimate, I was talking with Samuels, who did the bid documents for us, is that when they got the estimates, the company provided estimates using safety glass and not ballistic glass.
Okay.
And so that is what they felt was about a $42,000 difference. And, and so that's why there was such a difference between what the estimate was through Samuels versus what the actual bids were.
Well, it makes
So-
sense, and I think right along, we've been concerned about all sorts of threats, not the least of which was weapons. So I think it's important to do this project right.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions or comments on that? Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, have we compared this to what it would cost for something more similar to what the county is doing? They have a guard there with, it wouldn't have to be a TSA level like they have for the court and the judges and the jail, but we could have a security guard with a wand potentially that would cost us a lot less.
I would
I
say
guess I'm not
generally,
asking Eric,
one
maybe I'm
full-time
asking the-
employee is going to be like 90,000, at least $90,000 a year with fringes. So you're going to,
I think it's,
your return on investment is going to be pretty quick with the physical improvements.
Well, and the trouble with adding something that has to be staffed is that the staff allocation is a continual budget pressure year after year after year, where in this particular situation, you invest in the fortification really once and it stays there, versus having to pay people. I'm on a task force at county, and we actually had to move our meetings to the library because they were paying that security checkpoint overtime because our meeting ended at 7 o'clock. And so for every hour that you have to hold those people there and restrict that building access, that price goes way, way up. So, imagine trying to staff that checkpoint on a night that we sit here and fight with one another until 10 o'clock at night. So I feel like that's, would be a very, very expensive proposition for us here.
Well, if I may.
Go ahead, sure.
An unstaffed gate is no more secure than what somebody's creatively able to get through it. So we're still going to have to staff it, to watch it, to manage it. And I talked about this last time we talked about it, there are some soft things we could do in the meantime. We could issue badges. We could lock doors. As far as I know, we haven't done either of those. We haven't locked a single door. So if we want to be serious about it, we have to take it to a level where it is going to be covered by either cameras and staffed security. At some level, you can't have a locked door in a secure system without somebody managing it.
Right.
my
I think
opinion.
when we got the reports on that system to start with, though, there already is a volume of cameras located throughout the building. That's how they were able to tell when they did the security inventory, where they needed to work things differently. I also think that part of the problem that everyone was concerned about all along was people's ability to gain access up the central stairway unabated to every floor of the building, and then also make an entry into the basement through the stairwell that connects that in the lobby. So, I think it was more than just, some department locking their door. There's been credible threats here, and I think we had a pretty heartfelt discussion about the system when we approved it. Sarah?
I guess also there's a balance between protecting the employees and also having an open city hall. And I think this sort of does that balance in a good way. It does protective measures, but then it also allows public access to the city hall. So.
Additional comments? Go ahead, Carol, then Mike.
I was just going to say that when we did discuss this, that was my recollection as well, with, people entering at times that there was no one else here. And so I also, when we talk about staffing it, the first thing that always comes to my mind is that's the most expensive too, is staffing. So, and for those times that, weekends or whatever, staff may be here working on something, but then we wouldn't have it staffed. So I guess I feel good about this. I'm in favor of this option. Thank you.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, and exactly, I'm not a fan of security theater, but I think this is a workable solution. But one thing to also consider, you look at the price tag, and it is a lot of money, but also consider this includes reworking the municipal court and court clerk's offices, which I think that is a significant part of the amount of this entire project.
Right,
So,
for the way people enter and pay those things.
yeah,
Definitely.
that interact with the municipal court.
Right. I also think, given the fact that the project is already designed and ready to go, I also feel like we're kind of at a late stage to reinvent the wheel. We approved this, when? January, February? It's been a long time. Like, I don't know, this has been months in the making, and, to send them back to square one is counterproductive.
Well, we also approved it with the understanding it was going to be $180,000. So, we're facing the end of year budget right now. Maybe we're better off to push this into next year. We're already given an increase, or we've signaled an increase, and there's more to come. So
Right.
I just see this as potentially excessive. Are we going to have a armed police officer at our council meetings? I think we do
We
that.
normally do,
We normally do, so
We
we would
have one here
continue,
now.
we would continue to do that.
correct?
So, that we're not paying them chump change either. So I just think we need to put more time into understanding the complete package. It's not just putting up a
think-
gate to
I
fix
agree.
it all.
I agree. I think, there's a point where the rubber meets the road on the money part, but I also think people who have not experienced as a public official legitimate threats, if you've not been in a position where someone has walked in your office and threatened you, if you've not been in a position where you've had to be escorted from this building by the police late at night, if you've not been in a position where you've had people cruising past your house, where you've had to keep your children inside, I've been there. And I get the fact that sometimes employees don't feel safe, and not everyone that comes to City Hall with a problem leaves necessarily in a happy way. So, I think that there's a significant threat, and, I know that former Police Chief Bliven had a spirited discussion with the council the night that we started to really dig down the need for this, and, we were left with, pretty stern comments about the fact that people's safety needs to matter. And I feel like we need to follow through. Go ahead, Carol.
I will just second that. Once again, from being in a situation in working during the day in the schools, and we have to do the drills, and I care about the people that are working here. I'm not saying I'm not saying others don't. But I just think that this money is worth it to protect them and for their lives. And so I am not willing to push this back, because I think their jobs are very important. And I think there are other things that, if we had to cut, we could cut. But I am not willing to push this back. Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, city employees deserve a safe space to work. And we've been talking about these security improvements for many years, at least, for as long as I've been on the council, at least 4 or 5 years. And it's the price tag's only gotten more and more expensive.
Yeah.
When we first had the discussion, I was not sure exactly we needed it, but after, witnessing 4 or 5 years of just vitriol online. It's not, the situation hasn't gotten any better.
No, it's
And
certainly not.
It's just, it's a sad state of our society, and I think it's just something we need to do.
Doug?
Okay, last stab here, and I'm glad to hear we are willing to look at other areas to cut because we've got a supplemental budget to look at here, and that's going to take 60 more thousand out of that. So somebody's going to not get a person potentially. I'm not against security yet, but I'm against spending $250,000 if we haven't thought through all of ramifications that are going to happen. You're going to have UPS, postal, package delivery, cleaning. There's more to it than just putting up a fence. So that's my point. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the item? Motion from Lukens, is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
Okay, we'll record one opposed. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action on moving the transit supervisor from grade 18 to grade 17. You'll see some documentation from HR in that packet regarding those salary adjustments. This did somewhat stem from our activities to bring parity to other management positions in the city. They did find out that there was an inequity as well between a supervisory level here and a operator level, it looks like. So it looks like the recommendation we're getting from HR is to approve that upgrade. Does anyone have any questions for the HR director on this one? James is here if you do. If not, is there a motion to approve that grade adjustment? Motion from Martins, is there a second? Is there a second? Oh, second by Lukens, sorry. Further discussion? Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Let the record show that has passed. Item number 7 is discussion and possible action regarding amending salaries for elected officials. I think last month, the HR committee did some research and had a discussion about whether or not they wanted to adjust the salary for the next term for the council and the mayor. Periodically, that's an analysis that we do to see if we're keeping up with our peer communities or not. The Common Council, I believe, has not had a salary adjustment in, I want to say 19 years. It's been a long, long time. It's been the same since I started in 2008. Marathon County did just take an increase for their people. Although it looks like in the HR committee, their discussion yielded the result that we are still similar to a number of our peer communities who also have really not made significant steps to improve those salaries. Also, given the budgetary struggles that we find ourselves in and the struggles that residents are feeling the pinch on a number of things, city-related, water and things, I think it came out of that committee that they did not feel that this was the appropriate time. Does anybody have comments on that at all? Michael, go ahead.
I'll make a comment on
Sure.
this because I also sat on the HR committee and is part of that lively discussion. And I've got no preference one way or the other if we take an increase or don't take an increase. We are on par with the other, with most of the other communities that were surveyed around the state for cities and municipalities approximately our size, some a little larger, some a little smaller. So there was no big, there was really, no, trend that we were out of line or in anything like that. And for the mayor too, we did, I remember the last time we talked about the salaries, we increased the mayor's salary back in 2020 and, or 2019. And this time when we looked at it again, things were pretty close, with what other communities are paying. So, when, to move this resolution, through the process, I did make a motion in the affirmative that we do make an increase of 3%, and all 5 of us on the HR committee voted no to do that, so.
Okay. Sarah?
I guess I only see 4 people voted against it. Was there somebody absent that day? Oh, Don.
Don,
Okay.
yeah, Don Herbst was not there that day. Sorry.
And then I guess my other question is, on the resolution, it doesn't really say like guesstimate amount? Like, how much would it affect the budget? I know, 3% is 3%, but, you know?
I don't. I can.
Pop quiz, sorry.
Yeah, well, Mary Ann's looking that up. There was no, when we when at the committee, there was no suggested dollar amount, so it was the committee to decide.
So essentially 3% of 5,300.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
That's what we
3%,
meant,
yeah, so
5,300
I picked, when I made the motion, I took the 3% number because that's the amount we were considering
That's what we gave the staff.
with the Gallagher
Yeah.
study, correct?
Yeah, I think, so yeah, 3% of 5,300 is pretty small. So, they're certainly not a budget buster, but I think, it's how much?
About $3,500.
$3,500. So, yeah, and I think that really, it almost feels like that, how, would that change any of our decisions about, or anyone's decision about whether or not they would continue to serve, or anyone's decision out in the community about whether or not they would want these jobs? I don't think so. I feel like that's not, at one point, we looked at the same thing a number of years ago, and I want to say it was maybe 2014, 15-ish, and somebody at that point, it was a different time, but people were, talking about, well, let's just raise the council to an automatic $8,000 apiece, or let's pay them what the county gets. And so, those were significant increases. Would that influence a person's decision? Maybe, maybe not, but it is, I've always said, the most intense part-time job a person can ever have. You have to know a little bit about everything. There's times that it is very demanding, it's scary. It takes an awful lot of time, more time than people realize, like 20 hours a week. So, it's not that we're not putting in the time, but if we are close with our peer communities, it seems like this is just a good time to hold the line because, we've struggled to hold the line on other things. And I think we've worked hard to make sure that we've brought parity in the staff positions, which those positions are key resources. Our people are really one of our greatest assets, and so I think taking care of that first and ourselves second has really always been what we've done in this chamber. That's why we've had the same pay for a really long time. So I guess I would struggle to support that at this time, just given the economics of everything, even if it's a small amount. Doug?
Yeah, I would agree with that. We just back to the security question, we're going to ask staff to cut 60,000 somewhere, and I think it would be an extremely bad look here if we're looking to not hold the line on ourselves, and
Right.
let's just set the example, and I wouldn't support this one bit.
Okay, so then, given the fact, you don't have to take action on this one. I don't think, otherwise the option would be with someone like we did with HR. If someone wants to make a motion and everyone that doesn't want it would vote no, at least then you'd have closure from the two committees on the issue. I think for, if a future council wants to take up the subject, they would at least know that we made a decision in the negative, I guess. We'll have a motion from Martins? Is there-
I'm gonna make the motion in the affirmative again.
Okay.
That we increase.
And is there a second? Second by Lukens. All right, then, members in favor of the raise signify by saying aye. Members opposed, vote no.
No.
No? So we'll let the record show that has unanimously failed here as well. Item number 8, what time is it? It's 6 o'clock. I feel like maybe we should take the addendum items first and leave ourselves a little extra time to discuss. We've got the budget on tonight's, but this is really our normal business meeting. We're going to try to see if we can get quorum for a meeting the early part of next week when we have some more updated numbers from the other outstanding things that we've been waiting on. So we'll kind of leave the budget thing for last in case we run out of time. Item number 9 is discussion and possible action regarding sole source purchase of 2 dump bodies, V-boxes, hook lifts, wings, and hydraulic systems for DPW tri-axle trucks. And so with that, we have our fleet manager, Solomon, with us. If you have questions on that, there is sole source documentation in the packets for why they feel they have to get them from the vendor that they have selected. Does anyone have questions for Solomon on that? This is a situation where a lot of things have to work together and fit interchangeably. There's a lot of interchangeable parts on some of those trucks too, so. Okay, absent questions, is there a motion to approve the sole source purchase? Motion from Martins, is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item 10 is discussion and possible action regarding purchasing equipment early for motor pool and fleet. So I guess if you guys want to walk us through that a little bit, I don't know if Solomon has this one or if Mary Ann does, but, in the past, we have authorized the early ordering of equipment because stuff is taking so long to come. So I guess if you want to bring us up to speed on that a little bit, Sal, we would appreciate that.
Okay, good evening.
Thanks.
So the challenges are pretty much unchanged. At the beginning of the first and second quarter, we were having discussions where we thought it was going to get better. But with the current negotiations taking place in the fleet industry, we're pretty much in the same boat. And it looks like it's probably going to continue for months to years to come. So just to try to get ahead of things, we know where the budget's going to land for the most part, and just trying to get ahead of things is really the goal.
Sure. So do we get to a point, though, where when there's difficulty in ordering stuff in one budget year, and we try to order early, is there a point where the manufacturers will come back to us and say, we are never going to produce this vehicle, so you start from scratch on that stuff that you don't even have yet, or does the stuff eventually come?
It's a little bit of a mix.
Okay.
So in the past, we've had vendors that held on to us for a very long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't drop out because we already had that funding allocated.
Sure.
So if we decided to go somewhere else, and then they do build those, now we're stuck with both. Now
Oh,
what
okay,
do we do?
sure,
So we normally like to wait because we just don't have the funding to do both.
right.
We've had it then where they cancel, and then we have to go other
And
routes
s-
like
and
we did
start
with
over,
the
yeah.
Durangos last year.
Okay,
The other most recent conversation is that manufacturers are no longer canceling. They're just holding on to you, and you will get something eventually.
so it may
when
be a
they're
different
ready.
model year, but you'll eventually get a car.
Yes.
Okay, okay. That's helpful. We'll get
Yeah.
us something. Okay, and so it looks like, as far as early authorizations, so you want us to authorize the 2024 motor pool purchases ahead of time? Is that,
Correct, and I would work hand in hand with Marianne on that on every single purchase to make sure that nothing was ever over exorbitant from what
Right.
may not be there yet.
right? If they're way, way off, I mean, obviously, stop back and let us know, but I think it makes sense just because everything is so slow. I guess, committee, what do you think? Is there a motion to authorize staff to place those orders for 2024 early to get in line for production?
Question,
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
well, I have a question, so it looks like the next item is related.
The next item is about down payments that are required with those orders. That's something that's starting to happen new. So, but yes, I mean, it's possible we may have to pay down on the orders if we place them early. So we have to decide first if we're going to do the ordering.
So
but-
there are some that could be ordered without penalty and some
Depends
that
on the
would.
vendor, I think.
All right, well then, let's take it next then. All right.
Okay, so do we have a motion first to authorize the early attempts at the order?
I move.
Motion from Denny, second from Watson. Further discussion? Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Okay, so that brings us to our next item, discussion and possible action regarding equipment down payments. And I had heard some rumblings as we were walking through our budget process that some of these orders, manufacturers are asking us to submit those orders with a down payment, which historically they've not, right?
Right. And now the way the market looks, when we have these discussions with these upfitters is normally what it is. It's not normally chassis suppliers, it's upfitters,
Mm-hmm.
because they're purchasing all this equipment, and now they're sitting on it for months.
Sure.
And, they have all this
Lights
sitting.
and radios and computers and
Right.
docking stations and, okay,
So normally when you have had these discussions and you've said, well, we haven't done that historically in the past, we're really not interested in doing those, then they say, well, we'll move on to the next person. Because
Mm-hmm. Oh, boy.
they know that the purchase opportunities are there.
well, and you hate to get in a situation where the car arrives and there's no equipment to put in it or on it.
Right.
And sometimes that equipment is of some level of uniqueness where what fits in one model year won't fit in another model year.
Right.
Especially with the inside stuff, like computer mounts and things, so, how much are they looking at normally? Is it like they want half, or,
I gave two examples. One of them was from a very common upfitter that we use for a lot of heavy equipment, and they've been asking for 20% at the
Okay.
time of the order. And then the other example from a supplier that we use for medium to heavy equipment, they're saying that they don't want anything until a specific amount of time, and then if it's still 240 days or so, they want 50% down. And it says right there that if they don't, that they will charge the municipality 3 to 5% extra.
okay? So that's a little bit of a new ballgame. Now, I guess with the funding of this, because the 2024 motor pool money shows up in 2024, and we had been, paying at delivery, which was super convenient for us. So, Marianne, on the funding end, do we have the ability to advance that money and then pay ourselves back out of the motor pool when the funds appear, or how do we even handle that?
You could, and I think the other thing is just protecting that down payment to ensure that it, the product gets delivered and that, if the business goes out of business, what is the potential loss for the city? And so I'm not sure, what kind of legal language now we should be expecting in those contracts, if that's something that we should be looking at. I know we have a finance directors meeting with the league in 2 weeks, next Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday. And that's on the agenda to talk about, what other communities are doing too.
Right.
Because I'm sure if we're being asked to do
others are
these things,
too.
others are too, and there's, cities that are.
That's important, and I think if we would have to require a clause in our contracts for, refund of advance payments or something, I think that's certainly something we could work on. Do you want us to, hold on this until you've been to the conference? Like, in case you come back with new ideas? Or, should we proceed with this knowing that you guys aren't going to make down payments unless there's some sort of security? I mean, I think that you'll have good internal controls on that without, us instructing that, because you're already working on it. So, do you want us to act on it tonight or wait until you get back?
So did you have a pressing one right now?
The one that you approved beforehand for the sole source purchase, they are one of them that is requiring it. That would be out of this year's funding, and
Okay.
that's all budgeted for.
So that money is here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I feel like then we don't want to hold up that order either. Doug?
Sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to hold that up, but I also, if we're going to be looking at being creative here, it should be a two-way street. If we're going to try to put money up front, we should be able to plan better, and maybe the manufacturers, on the back end, will have some incentive. We can put some incentive in to meet our deliveries. Are they promising deliveries, or is this a down payment and then it's an open-ended, you'll get it when you get it? Can we work
has
that into it?
changed. It has changed. They used to say that you would receive your product within 180 days or something along those lines. And now it's for the most part that you will receive it, but it's on their clock because they're waiting on so many different vendors to come together.
So it just seems that there's opportunity to negotiate some sort of planning certainty for the city. If nothing else, negotiate some sort of a discount. So 180 days, you start the clock and we start getting some discount on that. I mean, I don't have a magic contract
Right.
in my pocket, but we're being asked to give upfront and wait forever. It seems like we're not getting much reciprocal.
Well, and if we're operating in a climate where the vendor also has a number of moving parts, I think it'll be difficult for them to give those type of guarantees as well. I think it's different if the vendor is physically producing the item versus sourcing it piecemeal. I think that's difficult, and I think if we're in a climate where they have a client base that is already agreeing to this without a whole lot of backpedaling, then it may be a situation where, like Sal has said, they'll be like, well, okay, then we'll pick a different municipality to work with, and, you can, take your order and do whatever. So, I agree. I think we should try to get some security in our contracts that, if this doesn't appear, that we get a refund. I don't know about a discount. I guess if there's certain vendors where you can measure benchmarks in terms of time, like IT projects are a great example of stuff like that, where you have measured outcomes that you want to see by certain dates. But if someone is going to deliver you a docking station, a radio, and a light bar, and you don't even have the car yet, it's going to be difficult, I think, to piecemeal that kind of stuff. So, I think it maybe is going to depend on the situation. I think the staff should be able to manage that, though, right? I mean,
Well, I guess
Go
take
ahead.
it for what it's worth. You're going to a conference. Those are some questions you can ask others. We have liquidated damages on the wastewater. So, if stuff doesn't show up, we're stuck. We got to get it done.
We have 'em on streets too,
Fire
but
truck
yeah.
doesn't show up, we got to get it. We're going to need it. So I'm just throwing it out there for what it's worth.
Sure.
Let's try to negotiate something if we can.
Yeah, because I think, historically, I might be wrong, but we haven't had like large purchase contracts on these. It's a purchase order and maybe, a small sales document. And perhaps we need to modify that, given that we're giving money upfront. And I don't know what that language would look like, maybe there'd be somebody, another community that's done something like that, or the city attorney's office.
I think that would be a great resource.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly others are in the same boat.
Right.
Because, I mean, we don't have a
So-
checkbook that we can,
Let's assume that our motivation is to approve this then, so that they can get that first order off the ground. We could approve it with the directive to staff that they take whatever measures they believe are necessary to secure those advance payments and, negotiate the terms of the contract such that they're not losing those deposits. I guess if that makes sense. Okay. Would someone want to make a motion to that effect? Motion by Martin, second by Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. That
Thank
motion
you.
carries. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us back to the 2024 budget. So where we left off last time was we had our list of supplements, and we had whittled that down to about half of them. We started out at about 16 cents on the mill rate, and we ended just under 8 cents, I think, or somewhere in there. The one thing that Marianne and I had talked about before we finalized those supplemental approvals, especially since 3 of them add workforce, is that I think we should take at least a cursory look at the deferred capital. Just because I think it's important that we and the public understand things that have been not funded so that we can add these other things. So, there's no doubt that the workforce requests that have come through are valid and people need people. But that comes at an expense because, in the deferred capital side, there's, some worthy projects that are certainly not getting any better by waiting. I mean, some obviously you can, defer safely, but one of them's a roof. So, I think, do you have that list that we can put that list up of the things that we deferred?
Can you,
We had it on a slide. It was in your PowerPoint. I think it was yellow. Let's see if I can find it, because I had the PowerPoint.
We don't have that in our packet, do we?
No, it was a separate, was it in the PowerPoint
I
maybe?
can find it on the web, because I have the PowerPoint on our website.
Yes, I
So
think
we'll
that
just
would be
pull it up from
helpful,
there.
just to make sure that we're good with, I want us to just make sure that we're good with what we've left sit, because this committee does have the authority to grab stuff off of that list that's been put in a holding pattern. And, maybe you want to swap out one thing for another, or, obviously, now, there was some painstaking deliberation done by the CIP committee over the summer, and they funded the things that they knew were, condition critical. And they did ask about the safety of deferrals on some of these things, like, can we get another year out of this roof? The trouble with getting another year out of things like a roof is that you can get another year out of a roof until you can't. We found that out at DPW. We kicked that one down the road until it got to a point where we had a situation where we had to do it out of contingency. So I just want to make sure that we all are good with the stuff that we hold up before we move forward on the supplements. The other thing that we want to know yet for early next week is we talked about parking. We did decide that this is not the time to make changes to downtown parking, although we have our eye on the future. But we also are looking for a little more firmness in the actions to be taken by the other taxing jurisdictions in terms of their mill rate impact. And we're also waiting for manufacturing levy numbers from the state. So those things are still open items for us for next week. But, okay, here's the
We got
list.
it.
So he's got the list. Let's see, is it up on the, oh, it's not up on the screen. We'll put it up on the screen, though. So the CIP committee, when it did its work, got a big book, just like your budget, of all the things that these departments needed. And it went through and it ranked and it scored, and, just like we do here. And, so the department heads made presentations to the CIP committee asking for these things. And, there was some back and forth, but let's just see here what we get on the,
So Lisa,
yes.
was on the slide, I guess Marianne, on the slide, is that in order of their ranking preference?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so. We're warming up. Our projector. So, And I guess just interestingly, in the requests for capital committee ranked items, the lowest scoring item scored 73. I mean, like when we look at the ranking process that we do for our ARPA, and we look at the ranking process that we did for our supplements, some of our stuff ranked at 42 and 45, and some stuff, like with ARPA would rank at 50 and 60. So, the lowest ranked item was still a 73. So it wasn't like these were frivolous requests, but, okay, so here's the list. The first one, and I think that was maybe the one that we started to delve into in the last meeting that we were a little concerned about, was the operational controls for this room. That's 140,000. Tennis court replacement program, year one, that's a multi-year thing, just like playground equipment. Every year they'd like to do one. Public safety building roof replacement, that is like a three-step process because it's three different sections. But, they would take it in stages and not get it all at one time. So 150,000 for that first phase of that. Historic athletic park, historic wall cap repairs. Those are when you go into athletic park and you are walking into the concourse, kind of over where the gift shop is. When you look out underneath where the overhang meets that historical wall, there's concrete caps on that, and they're starting to crack and break down. And so one of the things that Jamie explained to us was the manufacturer that has helped with other projects there has a cast mold that makes those. So it's possible to get new ones on there, but those items are, I think, also somewhat shielded from the weather because there's an overhang. I don't remember exactly how that worked.
So Lisa,
Yes.
you said all of these ranked high, or what
Well,
was their scoring standard?
They did. So the council chamber video upgrade ranked 87. It was just a matter of they ran out of money before they were able to drop the line to that point.
Yeah.
So, they obviously recognized the validity of the requests, but then they were also limited because you get to a point where unless you are willing to increase the borrowing for next year and take on more debt to get further down the list, because most capital is financed with borrowing, and I don't think they felt that they had the authority to recommend to us that we just go out and borrow more money. That's a decision we have to make here, amongst ourselves. So when they ran out of money, they drew the line.
So I guess, looking at that, what is the lowest ranking one?
The lowest ranking one was the land acquisition for Firehouse number 1, and we just approved that purchase.
On theirs?
Yes.
I meant on theirs.
Yes, so on the ranking, that's the last, I had that at 73. They had requested 815,000 for it, and that was the lowest scoring item. They felt that everything else was more pressing, but we actually funded that differently. We've already approved that acquisition, so that's kind of off the list.
Yeah, I found my CIP form here, so just to answer with Sarah's questions, I know the council chambers, or the stuff that we approved, the ranking ended at 88 points. The council chambers of video control equipment was 87 points. The lowest ranked one was the streets division, office repairs and upgrades with 80 points. And I think the tennis courts came in at an 89.
Right.
The other items above it were and the reason why the tennis courts actually came in so high is because that it was tied with a $25,000 private donation.
To dual stripe it for pickleball, right?
No, actually, it
Wasn't
was to convert it to pickleball.
Oh, convert it to pickleball.
Yeah,
Okay, so
but
there's,
because there was private money
right,
tagged to the project, it rose to the.
brought the scoring up, yeah.
Brought the scoring
I
up.
remember that.
Are the scoring conventions the same?
Yeah.
Okay, same scoring.
Similar, very similar matrix, we analyzed the cost of waiting, the community's understanding of the need, if they've identified that as a need, and if it's got strong public and private support. So there's a lot of things with that, but yes,
it's
they do
similar.
the same deliberation type.
It's a similar scorecard.
Yep,
Chair Rasmussen, if I may.
go ahead, sure.
You can actually take the athletic park historic wall cap repairs off of that list. We were able to work with Kowalski to have it within something that we can pay for in our small project fund.
Oh, good.
So that one can be removed.
Perfect. Love that news. Okay, so there, see, one more
Can-
problem gets solved.
Can
Go
I
ahead,
ask
Sarah.
another question? So,
Sure.
If, like, the council chambers one would be something we would want to put in here, like, what would be the impact? Because, like, would it be like 5 cents?
Yes, and the other option would be.
We talked about ARPA, didn't we, last
could-
week?
Right.
Thursday.
So
What-
this was, I think, initially an ARPA request, and
was.
then it didn't get funded with ARPA, and then we brought it to CIP, and it didn't get funded. Another option would be to say you're going to increase your borrowing, maybe not for this, because it's, probably doesn't have a really long life, but for another project, so that you could, afford it. But again, when we increase debt, then eventually the following year, most likely, you'll have an increase in the levy to fund that additional retirement.
Sure. So that was one thing we talked about Thursday. We just started down this path Thursday, and so I'm glad that we didn't make any final decisions, because I know you were gone, Sarah, so we wanted to make sure that we all are here when we make those final choices next week. But that was one thing we talked about, because they had requested ARPA, and we still have some ARPA left, that we could get that project done and get it off that deferral list, but with zero impact to the mill rate, because ARPA doesn't affect taxes. So there's that. I mean, we have that decision that we certainly could make, but I just wanted to make sure we're all aware, because Mike and I participated in CIP, but the rest of us were not there. So just the things that would wait. And typically what happens is things that don't get funded in a particular year get re-requested the next year. And so as that, and then assuming if the condition of the item or the situation is changing, the department heads make CIP aware of that, and, things may score differently, especially like things like maintenance, roofs, concrete, things like that. So that's, I just wanted to make sure that we all have seen that before we would, make a final decision next week that enlarges the workforce by 3.
So can we revisit that list, like, next Monday, if that's
I
the
think
date?
we could, yeah, bring it along, and we can lay that against the supplements, because we'll have, if we can, like, freshen up that supplement list too, and just show the ones on the spreadsheet that we picked.
Maybe what we can do is provide to the rest of the committee that capital improvement program request summary form that we worked on last summer. So I know I found mine in
I found mine too in the book, so.
in my pad here, but
Yeah.
I know the rest of the committee doesn't have that list in front of them, so.
I would like a copy.
Because then you could see the dollar amounts in the scoring, so.
Right.
Yep, we can get that. And then I realize we're close to council. I did rework the numbers on the administrative assistant position in community development. In the heat of the moment at the last meeting, we didn't really take into account, once you convert something to a part-time position, typically people don't take health insurance because it, becomes maybe less desirable because they're going to have to pay 50% or whatever. And so I made those adjustments in my calculation. I also took the liberty, which, is easy to correct, to make it a 55% time. All of the part-time positions in my office are 55% time because it brings you under 1,200 hours a year, which then saves you the Wisconsin retirement system. But you could, tweak that either by, if you
Sure.
wanted it to be the 60%, you could tweak it by starting, like a week later or whatever, from
Right.
April
Well, we had
1st or
talked about
whatever.
April, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact,
And
we
it
had
does
actually-
reflect the April
The
start date.
department heads had talked about starting all 3 of them in April.
Yeah,
So,
so
we'd have 25% savings on
Yes.
all of those new
Yes.
folks.
And
I
these
mean,
reflect that.
right, we get the full budget impact next year. I mean, I think we're all clear on that, but we would be able to minimize the impact and step into it a little easier if we started them a little later, so.
And I did adjust the police position a little bit too, because I'm not sure if maybe the 3% increase wasn't in, it
Oh,
needed
yeah.
adjusting when we compared it to the other administrative staff. So
Sure.
I took the liberty to make that
Current.
the real number too.
Okay,
So, And
and
the
then- yep.
Public Works one was fine.
Yep, and we opted to adjust ARPA for the paramedic tuition.
Yep.
We were
Yeah,
going to get that
updated
insurance
it.
fund reserved for the cancer screening, we knew. We were going to approve the recruitment and retention and the neighborhood listening sessions for 2024 only to gauge their impact. We were going to get the motor pool stuff, the on-call stuff from the motor pool.
Yep.
So we were able to work on that. And I think the items that we did not fund, the dual fuel conversion, we left that sit.
And the commercial
And the
travel.
commercial travel,
Yep.
we held that as well. So that's kind of where we've left off. So next week, did you want to try to do it Monday?
Sure.
So is Monday good for everybody? If we try the 30th, we know we do, well, none of us wanted Halloween, so if we try let's try for Monday at like 5:30, 5:15, whatever you guys want. Okay, why don't we shoot for 5:30 on Monday,
All right?
October 30th, and we'll get the agenda out then. And hopefully we'll have some updated numbers too that we've been waiting on, and then we can kind of hammer through some of this extra stuff and make our final choices, so.
Great.
All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Watson, is there a second from Lukens? Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? No one ever is. So we'll stand adjourned and we'll let everybody reset for council because it is time for that. It's 6:30 right now, so thanks, everyone.